name is Keven Cussen. I'm the product manager for LiteFarm, which started at the UBC, the University of British Columbia. I've been on the team since May. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of where the product is today, but I want to focus a lot of my energies on kind of where we're going in the short, medium, and long term, because I think that's where a lot of the opportunities for collaboration with some of the other participants in OpenTEAM are really going to become evident, and you know, partnerships could become quite powerful. So our agenda for today is I'll do a brief history, talk about kind of where the app is at present. We've got some really exciting upcoming milestones that I'll talk about. And I think that these are milestones that are exciting for LiteFarm, but also LiteFarm is part of the OpenTEAM community as well. I'll then talk about our mission statement, go through kind of our goals and our strategy for achieving those goals, and then some of the ways that I'm really hoping to engage with OpenTEAM moving forward. We'll then spend quite a bit of time going through the roadmap. So what are we doing over the next 2 months? You know, what is our next quarterly release going to focus on? And then, you know, when we get to the longer term, so like what are the plans for 2021, 2022 type of area. Then there was a few areas where there was quite a bit of interest around the work that LiteFarm is doing. One of those is dynamic input mapping for organic certifications. So I'll do a bit of a deep dive in our process on how we're approaching that. And then I will also lay out some of the resources that are available if you want to learn more about LiteFarm. Lastly, we'll close up with Q&A, and we should have plenty of time to do that. I don't think my presentation will take more than about 30 minutes. So just to start off, LiteFarm began in 2016. As I understand it, it was a fairly small scale project. We needed a simple tool to calculate the true cost of production per crop at the UBC farm. And at the time, there wasn't anything on the market that provided that for a diversified farm, such as the UBC farm. So Professors Whitman and Marabi formed a small team of part-time students, graduate students, PhD students, undergrads, and they built the small tool that would eventually become LiteFarm. It was extensively co-designed and beta tested by farmer organizations such as COABC, so that is the Coalition of Organizations of Organic Associations of British Columbia. Sorry, the EFAO, which is the equivalent in Ontario, and then Organic Food Company Nature's Path. So we did a lot of co-design workshops with these organizations, and then they were our primary beta testers to give us feedback on the features we were developing, primarily in, I think, 2019 and early 2020. Of course, 2020 kind of took a hard turn with COVID. So our project was thrown into a bit of disarray, as I imagine many of the other projects on the call were as well. So a big part of my mandate when I joined in May was to put in place a strategy for growing LiteFarm and, you know, growing the user base, growing the features, building the right things, and then also building a team in order to enable that growth. So since I joined, we have mostly transitioned to a full-time Scrum team. So this was a call that we did, I think, 2 weeks ago. We have 3 full-time student engineers. You know, we are based out of a university, so there's a big component of making sure that the students are getting as much out of the process as the users. We have 1 senior engineer, 1 full-time UX designer, 1 full-time product manager. We have a part-time SME, so this is someone that is a farmer and a part of the COABC, a data manager, and a research associate. So this is how we get together these days in the age of COVID. So where we are now in terms of the technology. We have a simple farm management app. It's able to log farm operations, capture cost per crop, provide high-level financials, and provide basic sustainability insights. So on the right, you're seeing the sustainability insights that the app can capture. There are some clunky interactions, and one theme that I've heard quite a bit from other participants in OpenTEAM is that there is plenty of tech debt to go around, and we have our own share of tech debt as well. So our focus in the short term is really to try to make some payments on that tech debt, and I'll go into that in a little more depth in a moment. We have a few active users, mostly in British Columbia, but throughout Canada as well. But we will be expanding. We have a funded joint project to expand into 6 different countries in Latin America at the beginning of 2021. So we do have large ambitions for expanding the reach of LiteFarm in the near future. So upcoming milestones, and these are things that are very exciting for me and that are taking up all of my time for the last probably month and a half and likely for the next month as well. So we will be doing our first general release of the application. The code is open source. So if you want to go do a search for LiteFarm on GitHub, you can pull it down right now and build it. We are doing very active development, and we will continue to do that through October with the primary focus of stabilizing the app for general release. Along with this general release, there'll be a lot of guidance, a lot of kind of documents that will go along with it, right? So we'll be launching a new website. It'll include a product overview, links to the stable and latest builds. So our stable app will be released quarterly, and we'll have new builds every 2 weeks, every sprint. The website will also include guidance for users, partners, contributors, donors, etc., ranging from, these are the strategic aims of the app, all the way down to like, these are the style guides for any front-end pages that you're interested in building, or this is how we build our unit tests. These are the mock factories for dumbing up data when you want to add a test to the end-to-end testing, right? So like the full gamut, the full granularity. We're also working on publishing our API right now. So there will be a published API doc for integrating with partners, because that's a big part of the strategy that we're trying to pursue. And then we will be publishing a live roadmap with an interactive portal for voting on feature candidates. So I will show you pieces of these things at the end of the presentation, but October 14th, mark your calendars. There's going to be a lot happening in LiteFarm world.
Chili!
I'm gonna guess that was unrelated. So our mission statement is to meet farmers where they are and equip them with the tools they need to make informed and responsible decisions about the health of their farm, their livelihood, their community, and the planet, right? So as is, part of the agroecology approach, it's a multi-dimensional definition of success, right? So we're working with farmers that are diversified, anywhere from a handful of crops, 3 or 4, up to 150, right? So there's a big gamut, but we're approaching this as an app that will help them on all of those different components of what they're doing, their livelihood. So our goal in the medium term is to put LiteFarm in the hands of 10,000 diversified farmers by 2023. So right now we have a footprint in Canada. We are going to be expanding that into several countries in Latin America. Our approach in doing that is working with farmer organizations that have a large reach, working with organic certifiers that have a large reach, so that we can say, like, these are the pathways to achieving what you want, and open up the door to a lot of farmers getting access. The tool is free, it's open source, so that's obviously a big draw. So our strategy in achieving this is 3-pronged. The first is focus on usability and utility for diversified farmers. And there's one phrase I think that kind of sums this up better than anything else, and that is, perfection is achieved not when there is nothing more to add, but when there is nothing left to take away. I believe this is from the French poet and author, shoot, what is his name? Saint-Exupéry, which I'm probably pronouncing completely wrong. But we really do agonize over each and every field that goes into the app. We agonize about anything that we're asking farmers to input. We're asking about anything that is a required field, because we want to reduce the friction such that any farmer, wherever they're coming from, whether it's, a diversified organic farms on the outskirts of Vancouver in British Columbia to, a farmer working in the highlands of Peru that's extremely rural, we want them to find utility and to feel like they understand how to use the app. So I want to quickly run through an example of how we do that. On the left is the first version of the Create Your Farm screen in LiteFarm, and on the right is the version that will be coming out in our winter release in 2021. Right, so what you can see is that we've reduced the number of input fields by 2. And that's because the units and the currency can largely be inferred by the location, right? So if I'm in the United States, it's probably going to be USD and imperial system. If I'm in Canada, it's going to be Canadian dollars and metric, right? So we don't need to ask the user, we can reduce that friction. On top of that, we've added a few other features. So the farm address now takes in street addresses that can be matched against a geolocation. It also accepts latitude and longitude. We've provided a little bit of guidance text to make that happen. We've also allowed the user to just click what is my location right now? In which case I'll try to pull down their physical location from satellite data. We've also given some guidance on when the inputs are completed. So right here, it seems like I can move forward, just click next based on the data being absent. In the new version, we're gonna have a lot more contextual guidance on when can you move forward, what are the required fields. So we'll get into a few more examples of this when we do the deep dive on the organic dynamic input mapping for organic certifications. But I wanted to give a concrete example of kind of this paradigm of usability and utility for diversified farmers. So the second prong of our strategy is to help farmers make a living, right? And I think this is really the biggest carrot, is to make farmers financially successful at their endeavor. So concretely, one of the pathways that we're pursuing is allowing them to use the app to get their organic certification. So we're working with COABC and their iCertify program right now, such that a user can enter all of the data that they need to into the system. At the end of the day, export that data and be able to hand it over to the certifying body, such that the vast majority of the work takes place in the app. We're doing this in Latin America as well, and we approach this as a strategy for expanding and really making LiteFarm a financial resource for these diversified farmers. The second kind of prong of that we're thinking about is that I would love to see a TurboTax style payment for ecosystem services. So imagine, I'm a farmer, I've drawn out my fields, I'm placing crops in my fields, and I have a hazelnut crop, right? If you're in British Columbia, there is an issue with eastern filbert blight that is affecting hazelnut crops, and the province will subsidize your ability to plant new blight-resistant hazelnut trees on your farm, right? So my ideal vision is we get to the point where we have this database of these available payment for ecosystem services, and whenever I trigger something, I get a pop-up that says, hey, we noticed that you're planting these trees, or that you've spotted this particular disease. There are programs that will help you kind of ameliorate for this issue, or they'll help you mitigate. Are you interested in learning more? And that becomes another pathway where farmers can get access to financial resources that they didn't necessarily know existed. Beyond that, we are providing sales data within a proximity for particular crops. So if I'm selling zucchini for $3 a kilo, and 20 kilometers down the road, there's someone that can sell it for $4 a kilo, I may consider moving where I'm selling my local produce. So those are two of the big prongs, and that's that's more the piece that we're looking at down here with this, this mapping. The last big piece of our strategy is that we really want to connect farmers with expert knowledge and tools to improve their practice, right? And what this means is that LiteFarm is not, we don't have the resources as an open source community to build both an amazing experience that is really useful for users, and then also constantly be building in the latest science. So our approach in trying to make the app as useful as possible and connect farmers with the latest science is instead to integrate, right? And this is a big piece of where our partnership with OpenTEAM comes in. We would absolutely love to build the robust APIs such that we can communicate the information, we can gather the information that are needed in order to do greenhouse gas estimations or to try to estimate soil types or organic matter content, whatever, in external tools, and then pull in the knowledge, pull in the maintenance and the support that those tools are gathering on their own, right? So like the way that I see it is LiteFarm is essentially an on-ramp where we are trying to appeal to the most number of users as a gateway to then deliver them to the domain services that are taking place in OpenTEAM and other open source consortium. So that's a good segue in kind of the ways that we're interested in collaborating as part of the consortium. One is we would love to help build the common infrastructure. So ontologies, role-based access control, common data formats. I think this is super important. You know, if we're going to have a collective of like tools and applications that integrate with each other, I think it's exceptionally important that we have kind of shared definition of what is a farm manager, what is a farm owner, what is a farm worker, and what does that entail that they can do with each of these tools. I would love to have a shared set of ontologies. You know, LiteFarm's participating in that working group, and then common data formats. I think would make it much easier to kind of build out in a cohesive, holistic way. Beyond that, integrations to connect farmers to the latest science. You know, that's very important to what we're doing. We're not anticipating building a lot of that inside the app. Instead, we would rather connect with the groups that are doing that science and building those tools. Beyond that, brainstorming, collaboration, and information sharing. I would love to share best practices that we found. I would love to participate and work with other groups to understand kind of what they've learned as well. And then, of course, joint funding proposals for areas where, you know, two tools may overlap, or we may be able to build something better together. So what's next? We'll discuss our roadmap in 3 horizons. The first is the pre-general release. Then we'll talk about the winter 2021 release, that's January. And then we'll talk about some of the long-term candidates, right? And especially with the long-term candidates, this is an area where I would love to collaborate with other folks that may have similar items on their roadmaps. So a theme on some of the more recent calls that I've heard is that any tool that's been around for any significant amount of time has had to essentially go back and spend a season just addressing some of their tech debt. And that is the phase that LiteFarm is in right now. You know, it was largely developed by students that were working part-time over the course of a few years. And now that we're really contemplating rapid scaling, rapid growth, we're trying to go back and look at our infrastructure, looking at our design and making sure that it's ready for that. So leading up to October 14th, for every one new feature that we add, we'll be addressing 9 bugs, 9 areas where there's a clunky interface, 9, you know, security vulnerabilities, places where permissions aren't well defined for a particular role, such as that. So you can see this is our current sprint that's underway, and almost everything there has some relationship to tech debt or kind of just shoring up the technical infrastructure of the system. At the end of the release, we'll launch the website and all the accompanying goodies and guidance documents that goes with as well. In the medium term, some of the features we are looking to launch are, sorry, that was supposed to be an image there, are a new onboarding flow. So right now, LiteFarm, it asks you all the appropriate information, but then it kind of just drops you down and you have to figure out what to do next. So we would like to make it more of a handheld guidance where users can understand, okay, now I'm set up, what should I do next? So we'll walk through what that looks like in a little bit. Step-by-step farm setup, dynamic organic certification form creation. We'll go in depth into what that looks like in our process for doing that in a few minutes as well. Multi-language support. So we will be offering the app in English, Spanish, and Portuguese to start with. But we're also considering a few other languages as well, depending on where certain opportunities land. And then in-app notifications. So we will be redefining kind of the current system of logs and making it much more of an active rather than retrospective situation. In the longer term, so this is spring 2021 and beyond, we've got a few different ambitious projects that we're looking at. One is a task-based farm management and advanced labor tracking. So right now, one of the features that LiteFarm offers is that it allows you to kind of gauge how your workforce is enjoying the work that they're doing. It allows you to kind of break down their happiness, their satisfaction, other intangible qualities with the type of labor that they're doing, right? So you can say, how happy is my workforce with picking weeds versus, planting seeds, etc. So we're looking to make that a little more granular, a little more powerful, and to have a really solid task management system built by spring 2021. We're also looking at the idea of a livestock module. We've already talked a little bit about the TurboTax style payment for environmental services suggester. We're looking at a crop scenario planning. So I have my fields, I have my rows, my beds, etc. I'm trying to understand based on historical data, if I want to optimize for yield, how do I do that? If I want to optimize for profit, how do I do that? If I want to optimize for soil health, how do I do that? So that's one of the ideas we're in early stages trying to think about. Integration of sensors and actuators for irrigation. So this is a collaboration that we're in the early stages with a few organizations in Canada right now. And then a holistic sustainability score. So we have a partnership with the environment, I don't know the name of the school at UBC, but essentially the program on the environment with a group of students over the next several terms, where they'll be doing a meta-analysis of all the sustainability indicators and scores that are out there, and kind of creating an accessible approach for our farmers to identify what that looks like for their small-scale diversified farms. There's a lot more than this. When we get to the roadmap, when we get to the candidate portal, we can get a little bit deeper, but these are some of the things that are kind of top of mind right now. So I've put a few links here, and I imagine I can share this with anyone that is interested, but these are some of the resources that exist right now. All of this will be accessible via the website once we launch that in October. But we've got the code, it's available on GitHub. We've got the latest app, which is at least a quarter behind at this point in time. The latest is the version right now, our development branch, that is up to date on all the features. We've got the stable app, which is several versions behind, that's released quarterly. We've got a roadmap, and we have an interactive feature portal. So I'll walk through each of these after the presentation, but I wanted to do a deep dive into dynamic input mapping for our organic certification first, because this is a place that I've heard a lot of interest expressed. So the process that we're undergoing to dynamically generate inputs for organic certifications is this. We first understand the output forms and fields. And we're very lucky we have a farm liaison from the COABC that is working with us that understands kind of the output forms that need to be generated at a deep level. And we're starting from what are all of these forms and what are the inputs on each of these forms that we need to populate. So that's the image that you see here on the right, you know, record I, record D, record MS, and there's certain pivots inside the system that get flagged to say, is this something that we need to generate? So for example, if I'm growing crops, which is the vast majority of LiteFarm users, then we likely need these forms. Right now, LiteFarm does not support livestock, so none of these forms would be generated. But in the future, if we expanded to offer a livestock module, we would have to incorporate that so that farmers could get their livestock organic certified as well. From that point, what we did is we built an approachable onboarding flow so that we can easily identify whether a farmer is interested in getting organic certified. And then we built an as-is process. So for each of the flows in the application, what are the input fields that we're capturing? And if there's any gaps for each of those flows that when it comes to the organic certification, how do we need to add the fields in order to like plug those gaps? So I am going to jump over to a browser. Can everyone see the browser? Have we transitioned successfully away from PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is our new onboarding flow that our very talented UX designers have put together for how we would ascertain in kind of the accessible utilitarian new style that we've created, whether someone wanted to become organic certified and whether we needed to kind of ratchet up the number of fields that were either required or even visible to the user. All right, so after signing up, you get an email. Clicking that email drops you on this page. Welcome to LiteFarm. This is the view that you saw earlier. We enter our farm name, we enter our farm location, integrated with Google Maps API to make this as simple as possible. From this point, I identify what my role is. This role is going to determine my permissions throughout the app. It's also going to determine the data policy that I see, right? So if I'm a farm worker, I don't have the right to give access to researchers behind LiteFarm, access to the data for the farm. Instead, my data is just the data about my personal use of the app. We then show them the data policy, get their agreement. And then this is essentially the pivot right here. Are you interested in organic? Do you plan to pursue or renew organic certification this season? Right, and if the user wants to know why we're asking that, we'll give them kind of a quick help text explaining why that is. But I hope you can see very minimal, very clear decision points like, how do I move forward? How do I move back? How do I agree? How do I disagree? If they indicate that they are interested, great. This is how this is going to impact your use of the app. We've got this little icon that we'll throw next to each input field that says, we're asking this because this is required for your organic certification. Because some of the feedback we've gotten on the current app is, you ask these questions, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, so I just either ignore it or I enter in some dummy data. We want to make it clear that if we're asking a question and it's got this icon, it's because it's going to be required for your organic certification. So if you don't know, you need to figure it out at some point, right? And if it's not required for the certification, we're going to do everything that we can as product and UX folks to try to remove that from the plate of the user. So currently working with COABC, but if that's not the certifier that the farmer is working with, they can enter in theirs. And since most of the organic forms are very similar, we can generate forms, kind of a generic template that should work for any organic certifier with limited modifications. So from that point, that's it, right? They've set up their farm. They've indicated whether they're interested in organic certification. After many, many hours of going back and forth, we decided this is the absolutely bare minimum information we need to ask the user before they can get into the app. And then from this point, they have options. You know, we give them guidance. These are some of the things you might be interested in doing. For example, you can edit your farm settings. You can map out your farm. That is your boundaries, your farms, your rows, other structures. You can manage your employees. Or you can go to the help center where you can watch step-by-step guides, video tutorials, and read about knowledge-based articles, right? And at this point, we essentially set them free in the app because we feel like we've given them enough information and we don't want them to get bored and kind of turn around. So that is the first pivot where we ask them about whether they're interested in organic. If they say yes, we're then going to ratchet up the amount of input fields that they need to enter. If they say that they're not, then many fewer fields will be required and many fewer fields will actually be visible in the app. So concretely, what does that look like? So this is where we started with the current app. This is what I call the as-is flow within the application. So from the point where I log in and I navigate around the application, this maps out all of the different flows, the paths that a user can take throughout. So for example, here we have the generation of a log. Right here, I have a log that has to do with fertilization. So, okay, I want to add a log. I want to talk about fertilizers. Where did it happen? What did I fertilize with? And what was the quantity, what's note, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And from this, we document all of the current input fields. And that's what the first column is here. We document all of those input fields to understand kind of what is the baseline. And then we look at it from two different angles. One of them is, is there anything here that needs to be captured as part of your organic certification, right? So here you can see augmented to meet COABC organic certification, required yes, visible yes. So we've added two new fields to this flow for a version that's coming out in the winter. That is supplier and whether or not that product is certified organic. And then we've added two more fields that are visible but not required, just because this will simplify the organic process. And that is an image of the label and an image of the ingredients list, okay? So I wanna talk about these three different sections. This is the as-is, so current and LiteFarm. This is, I'm a user in the new version of LiteFarm that has indicated I am not interested in getting organic certified. And this is, I am a user in the new version of LiteFarm and I am interested in getting organic certified. So you can see for the vanilla version, we have many fewer fields that are visible and many fewer that are required. As compared to the interested in organic, there are many more fields that are visible and there are more fields that are also required. So hopefully this is a concrete example of kind of how the system dynamically generates the input fields based on the needs of the user. And, you know, I could envision a world where at the onboarding, a user talks about, I'm interested in learning about payment for environmental services as well. And we would do something similar where we may add a field as visible or required or both for the, you know, to indicate interest or to collect enough information in order to provide that guidance to the user. So hopefully that makes sense. I wanted to quickly jump back and talk about some of the other resources that are available in LiteFarm. So we obviously encourage you to check out the code. You can pull it down, you can build it today if you're so interested. I might advise that you wait until October when we've made payments on some of this tech debt before doing that, but it's open source and you are welcome to do as you please. We have two versions of the app. One is at litefarm.org and the other one is at beta.litefarm.org. This is the older stable version and the beta is going to be the latest features, but it's obviously going to be less stable. This is our release roadmap, and this is something that is still a work in progress, but which will be made public in October, right? So eventually you will be able to go to the LiteFarm app, you will be able to look at kind of what we're building, you will be able to see the statuses, right? So green means it's delivered, yellow means it's in progress, blue means it's planned, and then teal means that it's a candidate, right? So you can see as we get farther out, things become much more candidate, just because there's a lot more flexibility and, you know, where do we get the funding sources, who are the partnerships, do we have the in-house talent or the partners in order to build this particular feature. So this will be part of the web release. And then one of the features that I'm most excited about is that we will actually have a product portal where our users and our partners can come and they can look at candidates, right? So we've got these different sections. I haven't completely populated this yet. This will be something that's completed as part of the October release. But essentially we have the things that we are building right now so that you can take a look at the features. And then the most exciting part is under consideration, right? So like these are the features where we think that it would be really beneficial to build this feature set into LiteFarm, but we would love to get additional feedback from users, from partners, from funders, etc. So this is where, you know, I might publish one of the guidance docs that I've created internally to try to get feedback from users. So based on this, you know, you could read through it. Someone could say, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, I'm going to upvote it. Someone else might say, no, that doesn't seem like a particularly useful feature, I'm going to downvote it. Or they might say, well, this is a useful feature, but you're missing out on this key thing, and add a comment. So this really just makes it so that we can touch base with the user on a much more frequent and volume-based approach to make sure that we're building the right things in the long term. So I'm going to jump back to PowerPoint. And I think I'm going to end here. So that's the presentation on LiteFarm, where we are, where we're going. The app is out there, so I encourage you to take a look. And stay tuned for October, when a lot of the resources that'll really be useful to engaging at whatever level you'd like to engage will be publicly available. So love to close it out here and field any questions that folks may have.
Thanks so much, Kevin. I've got, as always, I have lots of questions, but I'm sure there are others that would like to jump in. Particularly, I think there's been a lot of talk around the flow around organic certification and reducing the, again, we've had the concept of asking a question once, using it many ways to reduce the input burden on producers. So certainly open up questions for lots of other things, but if not, I'm going to follow up with you on that.
I've got a question about the organic certification. How are you getting that information to them? In what form, like PDF, or they have an API, or at least in this initial case?
For COABC?
Yep.
Yeah, it would be an export via CSV. So we would love to have a future world where organic certifiers have an API where we can just push the data. But the reality at present, per my understanding, is that most are not there. Like the more advanced versions are accepting electronic copies of documents, and the less advanced versions are accepting paper documents, in which case we push it to a printer.
Kevin, this is Britt from Stonyfield. I'm curious, also on the topic of certification, how you selected the countries that you chose to start doing certification in first.
Mm-hmm. So I can give some context to that. I joined the team in May, so I luckily inherited a few of the grants that we're expanding with. Obviously, when it came to the COABC, the University of British Columbia is based in British Columbia. we wanted to branch out across Canada. So we approached other partners in other parts of Canada. When it comes to the 6 countries we're expanding to in Latin America, that was a Inter-American Foundation grant where we're partnering with a few organizations in each of those countries. So that was essentially the selection criteria.
I can speak a little bit to that, and the basic answer is those organizations came to us. So we already had an established research relationship with them, and they said, we want to use LiteFarm and we will put resources into testing it. And so it's been a bit of a first come, first serve. So I think that's something to put to this group about, you know, our expansion strategy really is based on partnerships and who has time to invest in taking it on. So we've had students actually researching what are the organic certification requirements in India, China, US, and a few other places, just for our own background information. But really the strategic decision about where to focus has been user generated.
That's helpful. Definitely something I'd love to dig in with you guys more on as we start talking more about organic certification and OpenTEAM. I'm also really curious about how certifiers have responded to this. Are they enthusiastic about it? Do they like it? I think it's going to be interesting here in the US when we start trying this.
Crystal might be able to speak to that.
Sure, yes. The feedback so far has been amazing, especially just from the membership really wanting to participate in this. And in BC, we have a new online application renewal program that was launched this year that has facilitated the sort of electronic versions of everything. So with everybody getting used to submitting all of their paperwork electronically, this is sort of a next natural step for everyone. And you know, busy farmers, they want to do less and less record keeping, more and more getting their hands dirty. So, you know, we're killing kind of 2 birds with 1 stone. They get their management program, and then they get their records printed. So they're all pretty happy about it. We're really looking forward to the future production of this for sure.
And Crystal is actually our farm liaison from COABC. So she is as close to this as anyone could be.
Kevin, this is Christoph from Nori. Great presentation. I really enjoyed it. It seems like you're going after the holy grail of like incentivizing agroecology principles on farms. So just want to applaud you. As a fellow entrepreneur, you know, my question always goes to who is your customer? What are they paying for? And why are they paying for it? And as I hear this presentation, see like 8 different business models. So I'm curious, as you see the company scaling up, how do you make money and as you move forward?
Yeah, so great question, Christoph. And I've actually, I'm fairly familiar with Nori. Your co-founder presented to a group that I was working with. Oh my gosh, I'm completely blanking on it, for essentially blockchain use cases. So great question. The answer, the short version is that we are not a company right now. So we are essentially grant funded at present. In the long term, we do need to have like a long-term sustainability model to keep the open source project moving forward. I don't have the answers on what that looks like right now. I imagine it would be a combination of some grant funding. I would also love to build some sort of an ecosystem around LiteFarm where commercial partners can offer a service. And the platform comes for free, and then you would pay for the service or whatever the add-on bundle is, similar to a WordPress or a Drupal. One version of this that, you know, we're actually, I'm in early stages of collaboration right now, is with a sensor and actuator based startup where essentially LiteFarm is the analytic platform and the visualization place where I can look at kind of the water levels there for my irrigation setup. I can activate it via LiteFarm, say, okay, I want to water for 20 minutes at this volume per minute type of thing. and then turn it off, or do a completely automated, I just want to keep, you know, the water level, or sorry, I'm not using the right terminology here. I'm not from the agriculture space, but I want to keep it within these thresholds, right? And then the system would essentially keep moving. So I don't have a complete answer for you on what, you know, what the long-term sustainment model is for LiteFarm today. But that is at the front of my mind for the next 2 to 3 years. Does that answer your question, Christoph?
It does, but then it begs more questions. So I'd be happy to chat with you offline. I mean,
yeah,
you know, I'm happy to see you in this group and excited from Nori's perspective. Like, if we're creating market access and payments for ecosystem services, that folks using LiteFarm can take advantage of that as a channel, which creates revenue sharing opportunities for your company. But don't want to dominate this conversation. I think, though, maybe if I'm just blabbering, there's this other question around baselines and benchmarks that kind of matter in creating the basis for certain claims or any type of payment for ecosystem services. And so I'm curious how you're considering this space.
Yeah, so to be completely honest, we are very early in our discussions of how we approach payment for ecological environmental services. And this is one of the areas where we're looking to learn more and partner as part of OpenTEAM. So we are exploring, like right now, the thing that we understand fairly well is the organic certification and the process, how LiteFarm can facilitate that. We were probably 6 months to a year away from doing anything with PEZ, but it fits in with the idea of providing financial incentives for farmers. So I would say you and I should talk. Please reach out.
So I'd like to pick up on Christoph's point, because and sort of prime it in terms of some of the OpenTEAM conversations around question sets and question libraries and requirements, because certainly we've been talking a lot about this organic use case, and you've essentially implemented and showed how the pathway, the decision pathway in terms of what questions are going to be required and how we communicate that to a user. But what Christoph's getting at is, like, how do we then, again, at that beginning onto intake process, check a box and say, I need food safety monitors, I need food safety certification, organic certification, and I'm interested in potentially creating a baseline for a supply chain claim or other incentive programs like environmental service markets. So I guess my question is really, as you're thinking through the sort of the versioning process of the interface that you've built and how we are able to communicate, this is sort of a bigger question. I think we're engaging with the whole community, but just from your perspective, as we've come to realize, there's versioning process for those questions, and there's importance in terms of how we're asking them and at what point are we asking in the flow. So I'd love to hear your feedback both internally, but also sort of how you're seeing getting feedback from your users about that, that process.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I would say that there's kind of two big ways that we're thinking about how do we set the baseline. Like, when do we gather the information to make this pivot on what the app is for a particular user, right? So for the question of organic, it was so, like, there were so many routes kind of throughout the application that pivoted based on knowing whether a user wanted to become organic certified or not, that we felt like we just had to ask this as one of the first things. You know, when it comes to other schemes, you may not need to do that, right? Like, if the scope is much smaller, then you may not need to ask at the beginning. You can get context clues later on. And right, like the example that I always think about is TurboTax, right? So I'm filling out my taxes and either I'll enter something that TurboTax says, okay, wait, you know, let's take a slight detour here and let me get a little more information to see if you can get this tax exemption or you're eligible for something else, right? So like the example that I use with that is the hazelnut blight. Sorry, Crystal, I'm not using the right term there. But essentially, if I'm doing a scouting, you know, I create a task to scout my hazelnut, and someone says, oh, we've identified this, you know, this disease on your hazelnut, like that is a contextual clue to say, hey, there are resources available for you. I'm going to push you in this direction, right? In that regard, we don't necessarily need to ask at the beginning, right? Because if a user is interested, which I imagine is most users, that's going to be fantastic news. They're going to be blown away. You know, they'll drop their coffee and be excited about that feature. And if they're not, for whatever reason, it isn't a whole lot of friction to like give them one message and say, this is a thing that you may be eligible for. So I think it really gets to like the size of the fork in the decision tree as to when and like how early we need to be investigating users' interests and preferences in using the application. So I guess that's a really long-winded way of saying it depends. Or that's the way that I'm thinking about it.
But also that sounds very useful as we're thinking about these different question sets from the rest of the community to be able to tap into and saying, you know, here are some of those contextual clues that may reference a whole nother well-developed question set that you don't necessarily have to develop, but we can sort of feed in in your service, the service model that you know, laid out at the beginning of the presentation.
Right.
Other questions? We've got about 3 minutes before the top of the hour. This is a great opportunity.
Just at a high level, or maybe a low level, is this a native Android app? Is it a progressive web app? What is the kind of underlying technology stack?
It's React, so it's not native. We're considering moving to like a PWA or a single page app kind of architecture, but it's going to be heavily dictated by kind of the environment that we see in Latin America as we start approaching those users.
So right now it requires internet access to work?
Correct.
Okay.
Any last questions before we thank Kevin for another great edition?
And Doran, I don't have a question. I just want to thank Kevin and also suggest to everyone that and invite them to the Ag Data Revolution conference in 2 weeks, September 24th and 25th. So I can drop a link into the chat. It's free to attend and co-hosted by the University of Minnesota, the Foundation for Food and Ag Research, OpenTEAM, and many others.
And I guess we will be announcing the next couple months of in-depths after the UMN conference. And one of the themes that is going to be represented in the future in-depths is actually financing open source infrastructure, tools, technologies, and companies. So we're looking forward to co-hosting that with a number of our members. And Christoph, we hope that you'll be jumping in with us on that.
I think I'll be there, Dorn.
Great.
It's on my calendar.
Good. Well, thank you all to the UBC team and Kevin for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you at the conference in 2 weeks and then following up at our next session.
All right, thanks everyone. Take care.
Thanks again, Kevin.